Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Rumble. I'm very happy to have with me Natalie Strecker. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Strecker or Strecker?
I say Strecker, but you probably pronounced it
Strecker.
much better than me, to be
In
sure.
German, in German, of course, it's Strecker.
Cool.
Sometimes my brain works in English, and sometimes in German, I start like, how should I pronounce this name? Is it Strecker? Is it Strecker? You're a human and social rights activist. You served as a human rights monitor in Hebron in 2018. I'm very happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's a great pleasure. Actually, when I first wanted to check your background, I realized that you come from the Bailiwick of Jersey, which is in the north. It's an island in the northern part of France, it's in the northern part of France. And I researched and I found that it's a very beautiful destination. It has lots of places to swim, beautiful shores, and it always triggers this question. What caught your attention when you were younger? What triggered you to get interested in Palestine? And you are far away, let's say, from Palestine and atrocities happening there. Meanwhile, in the region, we see that there is a wave of, let's say, ideological wave trying to indoctrinate the younger generation that, oh, let's normalize relations with Israel, let's have peace with Israel, let's just turn the page and forget what happened and let's accept everything. For example, some of the Gulf countries have normalized relations and they are giving this education, political education to their youth, for example. But yourself, you come thousands of miles away from Palestine and you show so much enthusiasm and motivation. What triggered you when you were younger, let's say, and you decided to become a human rights activist?
Well, I think I was always interested in human rights. It was just something inherent in me. And probably that's also informed by my own upbringing. I was actually in care for a while as a child, and there were some difficulties around that. And I think probably that also informs my choice to understand the need to protect people's rights, wherever they are in the world. So I was always, when I was at school, I used to take part in the yearly Amnesty International campaigns where you could like write a letter to a prisoner of conscience and things like this. So it was something that I was always very, very interested in. Then I took a little bit of a religious route for a while, and really because I wanted the world to change. I was so angry at what I was seeing even at such a young age. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to return to human rights, but actually I didn't know very much about Palestine. I always understood it as, we're indoctrinated as a religious mess somewhere in the Middle East. And it was because two religions were arguing with one another, which obviously I think is the situation with a lot of people. I think that's changing now because of recent events, but, I have to be honest. Then when I was working at the children's service in Jersey, I kept hearing this conversation of one of my colleagues with her husband, who was Palestinian, about how her mother-in-law was stuck at a checkpoint. And this piqued my interest because I was thinking, why is she being stopped at checkpoints? So I started researching my stuff. This is 2007. And then I began to realize that actually I had been told a lot of lies about the situation. And so I became more and more interested. I started initially doing things in the background because I had some very close friends who were Jewish. Actually, my first boyfriend was Jewish and he had family in Israel. So I didn't want to hurt their feelings. So I started doing stuff in the background. And then as I learned more and more, I thought, actually, no, I need to go public on this. And the final trigger for me really was 2014 with Protective Edge, where I just thought, actually, I need to do everything possible to try and add my contribution to the worldwide movement to bring about a just peace in the region and to really to platform the Palestinians. So originally I had contacted Amnesty Jersey to see whether they would do something about Protective Edge. And I found out that the secretary of the local branch was actually an anti-Palestinian racist. And he said to me, well, there were two sides, and he wasn't prepared to do anything on the subject, despite the things that actually Amnesty themselves have been putting out. So I thought, well, if you won't do this, then I'm going to just have to set up my own group. So I ended up, I'd noticed in our local paper that a local politician had raised the subject in our local parliament on Gaza, on protective edge. So basically, I kept tweeting him until he responded, asking if I could meet with him. And then I found out he was at a protest I was going to about a finance center. So basically, I walked around, there were 3,000 people, and I walked around until I found him. And then I asked if I could meet with him and the need to set up a group. So basically, it came down to really learning through a colleague at work, but also realizing how the Palestinians have been so dehumanized and so defamed. And I think it was that, and actually Amnesty's response that caused me to focus mainly on the Palestinian issue.
You know, when I was young, I grew up on this footage of the Second Intifada, and it was always in my conscious. I come from Syria. I'm an ethnic Armenian, and I wasn't exposed to state propaganda in my younger age. I was still too young for, let's say, indoctrination. But it was impossible not to see what's happening in Palestine, right? With all the suppression, oppression, subjugation, humiliation. If you're a human, you will feel that it hurts your conscience as well. And then the invasion of Iraq happened in 2003, the invasion of Lebanon 2006, and then the regime change wars of the CIA in different parts of the world. I was always interested in championing people's rights, and here comes that people's right is for their independent right, their right to have an independent choice who they want to govern and who they don't want to govern. For example, like you could have your own differences with any ruler, but I don't want for the Americans to come and say who is the best leader for me. So I took the path of trying to enlighten the people of what's happening in West Asia or in the Middle East. And this has taken me 10 years because my professional work started in 2012. And then I realized that this is not about enlightening politicians. They know what's happening in the region. And and when you mentioned racism, and this is correct, they really feel and consider the people of the region less than a human. This is even in their terminologies and in how they describe us. We are the barbarians, right, in the region. The rest of the world is in Europe and the United States, it's like a garden and we're the jungle. This is what Joseph Borrell said just a few months ago. So I realized that no, my approach, which is like, oh, let me explain to you what's happening in the region, is not really fruitful. So I took more a confrontational approach against them, trying to really expose the hypocrisy and the double standards of this type of officials and who are funding them, behind them, in literally killing hundreds of thousands of people. And this is a really dangerous thing to do nowadays because these people are very, very powerful. And what happened with you recently, it caught my attention on X because it was suggested to me. And upon arrival, you attempted to enter Palestine to support a humanitarian organization. But the only democracy in the Middle East denied you entry after interrogating you. The official narrative says that you undermined Israel. This is what Israel says. What happened? Can you please walk us through what happened with you and why do you think they stopped you to begin with?
Yeah, so what happened was I'd made the decision. Actually, originally I was supposed to be on the Freedom Flotilla attempt to try and break the blockade of Gaza. So that was my original plan. But of course, Turkey wouldn't allow us to sail. The Hundala obviously is still heading there and really encourage people to really sort of track them and raise awareness about this because I think it's a really important initiative and the best chance also of keeping them safe. So when that like fell through, I felt like I needed to try and do something because obviously I've been organizing protests, a number of actions at home, and at times, like many people, I think, just screaming at my phone about what is happening. And I just felt I needed to do more. So I made the decision that I would try to enter the West Bank because obviously, although the main focus is rightfully on Gaza, things have escalated with the settlers, with the violence there, with the ethnic cleansing there. So I decided that I should go attempt to visit and try and support how I could with a humanitarian organization that I know very well. So I tried, obviously, to enter. I knew it would be difficult. I was careful. I took a new phone. It feels like sometimes that you end up having to become some kind of spy to go to Palestine, which is crazy, as most people will know. You can't just enter Palestine without going through Israeli security, which in itself just demonstrates the utter nonsense that is this claim of them being a democracy or doing anything with any legality. So when I went through 2 lots of security first, actually I got stopped at both. Once on the second occasion, they took me into a room and they made me take my top off again, which I've done in the past actually at often military courts, where they strip searched me. But this time it wasn't as bad. And then after that, I was made to wait probably for about 45 minutes. And then I was taken in. And first of all, they asked me so when I went to the desk, I went to the desk, which was the third part of the security. They asked why I was entering, but immediately as I handed over my passport, I could tell by the guy there was alert, because he immediately started typing things on his computer, and then he asked me some questions that he said I had to sit down. So I had to wait for about 45 minutes, and then I got taken into a room, and the first thing they asked me was, when was the last time I had visited Israel? So I knew that they had all this information. I had a new passport, but I knew they'd have this. So I said 2018. And then they said to me, who did you come with? And I know from friends who've tried to enter before me, re-enter after serving in the area. I said I came with EAPPI. So I was quite honest, because there's no point lying about this. I know they have this. And then immediately they said to me, we didn't like what you did here. You caused many problems with the soldiers and stopped them doing their work. You're taking photographs all the time. And I said, yeah, I took photographs, but I refute that I was causing any problems. And then they just asked me lots and lots of questions. And then they said to me, so why are you going? Why do you want to come here? So I said to them that my plan was to visit Jerusalem, because I thought it was the last time I would ever get to visit the Middle East, and that I wanted to take the opportunity to visit Jerusalem. And then they were asking me questions about well, why would I be doing that at this time? And I said, because I probably won't get to come here again. And they were saying, that we're going to be going to war, and I just said, yeah, well, I'm also hoping to meet my friend in that. And I feel it's important to be able to come and support her also. So, which actually was true. I have a good friend, Inat Wiseman. I don't know if you're aware of her, but she's an Israeli actress and anti-Zionist, does some incredible work on the subjects and plays and such. So I knew that she wouldn't mind me mentioning her name, because I thought there was no point I could make up some elaborate story. But the problem with that is that you immediately they'll know it's not true. So I just thought, actually, I'm going to test this nonsense again, that you're a democracy. So then they said to me, they asked me some more things. They told me they weren't very happy with me, that I was a problem. And then they said to me that actually last time I had left, that I had been banned for 10 years. I wasn't told this at the time. I know that when I left, I was, because they give you a rating. I don't know if you're aware of that, but when you leave Palestine, or when you leave Ben Gurion, or they give you a rating, and the highest you can get is 5, and I got a 4, which I was disappointed, because I kind of wanted a 5. Yeah, so I got a 4, and I had gone through questioning, went through the extra security that you go through when you're above. I think it's when you're above a 3, you have to go into special security, which I did. But basically, they made me wait for a long time. I was told I'd undermined Israel. I didn't bother arguing with them. There's part of me that just wanted to say, well, actually, you're undermining yourself, guys. But yeah. But they made me wait for a long time. I went through the process for about 3.5 hours. I mean, not as long as some people. It could have been a lot worse, to be fair. When I think about some of the interrogations, and I mean, my privilege of being white and European probably definitely meant that I had an easier time than others could. I mean, you know, they said some not very nice things, but it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it could have been. And at one point, I was worried that I might get arrested, but I wasn't. So,
Yes.
and then I got basically escorted out. I couldn't. They wouldn't give me a passport. Right, it was actually the Jordanians that gave me back my passport. So I was escorted out onto a bus by myself. And then I had to go through 3 lots of Jordanian security then with them asking me, why was I kicked out? What was the issue? And then I got interviewed by their security at one stop. And then the soldier came on at another stop. I had to get a friend to kind of speak to them and help sort of translate the situation. And then finally I went to another, like the final security, which is actually at the border itself. And I got held there for a while. And after, yeah, it was a long day. And then I was released and able to make my way back to my friends.
Thankfully, you were not detained and you haven't stayed in their dungeons, because I don't think that's the most humane place to stay. And
No.
we know from the previous experiences how they treat people that they don't like, and especially if they
Yeah.
don't like his or her opinion. Um, I would like to ask you something. Before the 67 war, my grandparents were able and used to go to Bethlehem. It's for religious purposes, to visit Christian religious sites, for example, and they used to have tattoos on their arms when they come back, the exact date of their visit to Bethlehem. So I used to see on their hands here or here on the shoulder the date of their visit to Jerusalem and to Bethlehem. This was something fascinating and beautiful that I grew up with, and I always wanted to go to Jerusalem. And I have a Syrian passport. And Bethlehem is technically a Palestinian territory. But if I want to go to Bethlehem, I have to go through the same procedure like you did, right? I have to go to Tel Aviv and or any other airport, and then pass through all the checkpoints and go to Bethlehem. But the problem is that they don't accept even Syrian passports, which means they are blocking me to go to Palestine completely. But here comes the issue with um, the Christian Zionists, for example, in the United States, telling me that this is completely bullocks, this is completely false, and I'm lying basically to the people. That I can go basically to Bethlehem and visit Bethlehem, and nothing will happen to me. And I mean, from your experience, do you think that if a Syrian like myself, a Christian, goes to Tel Aviv, would I make through the airport, and what rating would they give me?
Yeah, I think from my experience and looking, so when I went to serve in 2018, there was actually somebody else who was supposed to come from another country who I think might have had a Syrian background. I can't remember exactly now, but it was certainly Middle Eastern, and they were Christian, and they got immediately denied. So I absolutely believe, and knowing other people that have been stopped. I mean, we need to remember that Israel has even stopped Jewish groups from entering when they've been anti-Zionist, Jews. So they will stop whoever they feel is a threat to exposing them for what they are.
Yeah,
So I absolutely think, and I imagine you'd probably get the top rating. You beat me. You'd probably get a 5, I reckon.
incredible, really.
Unfortunately, I mean it's just a joke. And in terms of Christian Zionists, I think the problem is that it's for ideological reasons. They are religious extremists, and it's this ideology that it won't enable them to actually consider facts. Anything like I guess with a lot of people with extremist ideologies, whether those are political or religious or otherwise, anything that counters, it's that confirmation bias, isn't it? You'll accept anything that supports your worldview or your religious view, whatever it might be, and you reject anything that goes against that, because otherwise you have to confront the reality of your belief system, which can cause people to feel very afraid, and they feel it'll undermine their faith and their belief system.
Yeah, they would feel very uncomfortable about it, to open the horizon and see what's happening around them. And this week, Israel committed many horrendous crimes in Gaza. It's ongoing since 10, 11 months. But this week, there was the bombing of a school in Gaza where Palestinians were taking shelter over 100 Palestinians got killed. Israel said, look, I killed many Hamas operatives there, and they randomly published some pictures which were later debunked by many of the local residents there, and saying this was a doctor, this was an engineer, this was my neighbor, this was a vegetable seller, this and that. And people, because Palestinians, they would know their neighbor and what their profession was. There was another incident which was reported widely, that 4-day-old twins have been killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza while their father went to register their birth. So he got the birth certificates and came back to his home to realize that 4-day-old twins and his wife got killed by an airstrike. Now, I did a little bit of research, and this is the mother. The mother, her name is Juman Afa, and she was killed alongside her 4 or 3-day-old twins, Aser and Aysel. And I realized that she was active on Facebook and posting reports in English. And I said, considering Israel's history of targeting journalists and activists, it is difficult for me to believe that this killing was anything but intentional. These were the twin babies, which were born only a few days ago, and this picture was posted by herself on her social media on Facebook, and both of them were killed. And this is the father, when the father went to issue the birth certificates, and when he returned back, he realized that his entire family were wiped out. Then I want to know what the mainstream media is speaking about, and then I go to BBC. The BBC report goes by, baby twins killed in Gaza as father registered birth. They don't even mention who is the perpetrator here. I mean, the complicity of the media is utter disgusting. Like every day I say like nothing will shock me any longer, and then I still continue to be shocked the way they report about it. It's just unbearable how they are, as you mentioned, dehumanizing the Palestinians, right?
Yeah, it's been incredibly difficult to observe, I think, like many, what's been happening over the last 10, 11 months. I mean, it was difficult enough knowing what was going on there and seeing the things that I saw when I served there. But it's been difficult to try and work out how to navigate this. And seeing the lies and the gaslighting. It's bad enough knowing all these traumas are happening, but the gaslighting that happens with it, there's this dehumanizing language, but we're told to deny what our eyes are actually seeing. And I think that the media are part of the issue. Well, you know that. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say, but I think that they need to be held to account as well. I think we need to recognize, expose them for what they are, and inshallah, in the future, when there are trials, the media needs to also be put on trial. Because to me, my view now is that Zionism, and this has been the view of a number of people for a long time, but I was always very sensitive with my language. One thing as me as a person is I always try to speak to people's hearts, try and win them over rather than to attack people as much as possible. Obviously, there are times when it's appropriate, but for me, I've always tried to engage with people in that way, and I hope I can win them over, because I like to believe that actually most people are generally good, maybe ignorant and other things. But I do agree now that Zionism is our generation's Nazism. And I think the media are complicit with our generation's Nazis. And I think that they should be held accountable in that way. I mean, there's very few. I mean, obviously, Al Jazeera are doing a fantastic job. And now and again, you'll see like Channel 4 in the UK can put up some good stuff. But the BBC for a long, long time. But this is the thing, right, is that Zionists, are, you know, whether those are obviously the Israeli state, the, Israeli Jewish Zionists, but also Christian Zionists have been putting a lot of money into propaganda and into buying corporations, our media, and also our governments, you know, our government elected representatives. And I think this is the issue, which is why independent voices such as yourself and others are so important. But then we're also battling against, you know, social media, who are being owned, bought by Zionists too. You look at what Elon Musk has been doing on X,
Disgusting.
but it's not just there. It's disgusting. And like Meta, And it goes on and on and on. And this is what we're fighting against. But one thing I would say, and I see it, and this is what gives me hope, and it's really, really difficult to find hope in current days, but I think it's important that we do hold on to it, because otherwise we end up falling into a pit of despair and we lose energy, and people end up giving up. So I believe we should always look for the hope and hold on to hope. And where my hope lies is in recognizing how many people have become awakened. And I think that's the one thing that this situation has brought, is the masks have been ripped off about the legitimacy of Israel, its propaganda, but not just that, about our empire. You know, the US empire, the Western empire has been exposed, and its Arab despot nations, governments, has been exposed in their full, wickedness. They've been exposed for that, in demonstrating how corrupt they are, how bought they are, how they do not represent ordinary people. Because if you look just in the UK, for instance, where you've had marches with over 1 million people marching, and we know the vast majority of ordinary people support a ceasefire and now support, and want action taken against Israel, and the governments won't even take the most basic steps. Obviously UK was looking at undermining the ICC application for arrest warrants. They're trying to make it harder to protest on the subject. They've been demonstrating Islamophobia, all of these things, and calling us hate, the people marching hate marchers, even though it's the most diverse group marching. You've got parents with their children, with their dogs. I've seen every color you can think of, every religion or non-religion marching. So I think in the long run, I think this will lead to the end of the US empire and Israel. But in the short term, obviously, it's causing a huge amount of pain. But I think when this finishes, we need to make sure that the media, along with everybody else, is held accountable for what they enabled.
I never intended to become a journalist to begin with. I had other dreams in my life. I wanted to become a Syrian diplomat representing my country, and then a sense of responsibility has pushed me to start working online and writing in English, trying to educate the people of what's happening in our region, right? Therefore, I especially despise the journalists, and they are not journalists for me. Eva Bartlett once called them prostitutes. She said prostitutes. She's a Canadian journalist, and nowadays I have so much contempt and disgust towards these journalists who either support the Israeli side or they are silent, because silence in such cases is also complicity. What's happening there? And I would just mention an example. I don't want to brag about it at all. I don't want any praises about this. I'm not telling this to get praised. Only recently I got contacted by a company, because this channel is now between 200,000 and 400,000 people watch it monthly. So it's lots of views. And for a company, it's an attraction. So they sent me an offer telling me they are a water company and they would like to cooperate with me if I could play 30-second video of the product on every live streaming. And in return, I will get $30,000 per year for advertising their product. And I was like, wow, this is the first time I received such an offer, and I checked and I realized that this company has a mother company, and this mother company has close ties to the Israeli government. And I sent them a letter and I said, I reject your offer because your mother company has ties to the Israeli government, which is committing horrendous crimes nowadays and crimes against humanity, against the Palestinians there. And why I'm telling this, because you only need a little bit of integrity and dignity in your life and act upon it. And this is what really lacks in many of these journalists, including my colleagues and my schoolmates. We graduated together, and you see how they are passionately working for the system which is crushing the people, and in return, how much more money they are getting? It's not much, and it's more about fame, more about receiving prizes, getting invitations to conferences, and mating and socializing with some of the politicians. Sorry, but you're becoming the lapdog of these people. Your job basically is, as a journalist, you are the fourth authority in any country. You should hold the politician accountable, and not to socialize with them in a way that you become cozy with them, right? And this opens opportunities for these journalists to become politicians. So this circle of journalistic political circles are so corrupt nowadays that I don't want to be anywhere close of these people. And you were speaking about Israel as being a brutal country against the Palestinians. You compared, these are harsh words, right? You compared the Zionism to Nazism. We have the ambassador of Israel in the UN. I want to show what he said yesterday in a video in the UN, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this. This was yesterday. Israeli representative to the UN gives his farewell address, says he was proud to represent the most moral country in the world, the most moral country in the world. You listen, the Palestinian representative, he was directed.
Colleagues, as this may be the last time for me to address you as Israel's ambassador, though who knows, perhaps another session will be called because of more terrorist propaganda, I would like to leave you with this. I have been immensely, immensely proud to represent my country here, the most moral country in the world, the most moral country in the world. You listen, Palestinian representative, in this warped place. I hope one day you will also see the bias and perversion of morality here, and I pray that you will see the truth. The terrorist organization that this guy represents here and tyrannical regimes should be condemned, not protected, and that Israel should be praised. We are today the vanguard of civilization. We are the vanguard of civilization. But until then, Am Israel Chai. Thank you, Mr. President.
Before October 7, I had the illusion that Israeli officials are the most brilliant, intelligent people. Seriously, I thought so. In propaganda, in politics, in strategy, in diplomacy. And when I see this guy, I wonder myself, how is it possible for this person to represent Israel? It's a clown show when you listen to him. And you don't need to tell someone that we are the most moral country in the world. You just have to act upon it and be the most moral country in the world. And every time, if you want to stress and repeat that, which means maybe there are some doubts about it.
Wow. Sometimes I feel like we've slipped, that I'm an extra in some kind of really dark comedy, dystopian comedy, when I listen to things like this. I mean, it's an example. I mean, you've heard people say that every accusation is a confession when it comes to Israel, and it's true in terms of what the language he directed at the Palestinian representative. But it's this attempt at gaslighting. I mean, Israel and the empire is trying to drag us into George Orwell's 1984. And I can't remember who it was that said it now, but the person who something much more eloquent than I said, if you keep repeating a lie, it becomes a truth. And I think that this is what they hope for. But I think that just evidence of that gaslighting. But I do think people have wisened up to it. I feel like now that you have the only camps you have are those who are either for some reason still fully ignorant, and I don't think there's anything possibly you can do now to awaken them. Then you have the vast majority who are pro-Palestinian. The only people who are supporting Israel are either doing so because they're racist, they're just racist individuals, or because they have a religious ideology like the Christian Zionists, or otherwise the liberals who benefit from the status quo, who benefit from empire. And I think so much of this is connected to our economic system of neoliberalism, and that's why I think things have continued for so long. So I feel like that this, like I said, there's been this great awakening happening, and it's the only thing positive I think that comes out of this is people actually at least understand who their enemy is now and what they look like. And so it doesn't matter whether they go in and come out with this absolute utter nonsense. People just won't believe it or accept it anymore unless they are people that support Israel for the reasons I have just mentioned. It's just ludicrous. I mean, I feel sometimes like, is this like some kind of parody? Is this a parody like session where we're looking at? You know, it's just insane. And the fact that they even have the front to kind of say these words and feel that any reasonable person will listen to them and go, yeah, actually, there's probably some truth in that. Israel was built on terrorism. You know, long before even, you know, we talk about like 8 decades or 76 years, 8 decades of Israeli terrorism, but actually it started long before that. You're talking about over 100 years of Zionist terrorism, you know, and it's interesting because when we look at its chief sponsor, the US, of course, was built on its own genocide and the enslavement of obviously individuals from the African continent, you know, so its foundations, the US foundations are rotten, and so are Israel's, and because of that, it will eventually fall because it must. It can't continue. It doesn't matter what lies it tells to others or even tells to itself. It will not continue because they know deep down. I mean, some of them know anyway, but those who've been indoctrinated, which they have for many years. I mean, it's been a very sophisticated form of indoctrination. I mean, Israel is the most militarized society, I would argue, in the world. This is something we were told there, and actually Chaim Bresheit's written a brilliant book called An Army Like No Other, and he'll talk about how Israel is an army that has a nation, not a nation that has an army.
Yeah, almost everyone is in the military, even women. They serve when they turn 18 years old to serve in the military. In parallel of this, we have this week the United States greenlights $20 billion arms package for Israel. This is the first news. The second one, which is more interesting, and this is a statement coming from Germany after the bombing of the school, which killed around 100 people. And this is the government deputy spokesman, Wolfgang Beuchner. This is what he said: Israel has the right to defend itself. The reality is that Hamas uses schools, hospitals, kindergartens as command centers, and that the people in the Gaza Strip are also abused against their will as protective human shield. He continued saying that that is also a sad reality in this situation, and I think you have to be very careful about sitting on one-sided reports that are distributed by Hamas and believing everything that is spread by this side. When I see this support coming from the US and Germany after all these crimes, I truly ask myself this question: where is the red line? 100,000? 200,000? Nuclear weapons? What is the red line? Like, do you think that there is a red line for these countries, or this is just an absolute unconditional support for Israel?
I think, unfortunately, we're in a situation where there is no red line. I think that's my fear and personal view, because part of it is a battle for hegemony, like, and I think that this is part of the reason why the US knows that it's beginning to fall, and so it's becoming much more belligerent, and it's scared of losing obviously control of resources and control of the region, and obviously the EU supports the US, but I don't think there is, and I think I mean, in terms of Germany, the issue you have is that Germany's never really dealt with its fascist history. All it's done is changed its target audience, you know. And actually, if you look at what Germany has been doing actually to anti-Zionist Jews within Germany itself, it's been utterly horrific. Some of the stuff, the beating that's happening. So I actually think you're seeing actually this rising again of this fascist narrative and tendency. I mean, it's a nonsense, this idea that Israel has a right to defend itself. Which occupier can ever claim a right to defend itself? Even like the ICJ's recent ruling or legal opinion that demonstrate, you know, that says that Israel's occupation is illegal, and it recognized that Gaza was occupied. Actually, they can never claim defense. There can be no claim defense. And this whole nonsense around human shields. When I know actually one thing a BBC reporter a long time ago said, which was fair, was Jeremy Bowen said he saw no evidence that Hamas used Palestinians as human shields. However, what we have seen with our own eyes is the Israeli occupying forces using Palestinians as human shields. So all of these things are just lies, and it's just this attempt at gaslighting. They know they're losing the narrative, so they're trying desperate ways and just keep, like I said earlier, repeating lies in the hope that some will stick and that people who are ignorant maybe accept this. But I think more and more people are understanding. And actually, none of us, like I often think, my granddad's Irish, and I've been learning a lot about this sort of Irish history. And if we think about, obviously Ireland is occupied in many respects, part of it still are in some ways, but not like it obviously it used to be. And we know the IRA obviously was a symptom of the British occupation. But the IRA did things that I absolutely don't agree with. I would never support. But none of us would have accepted, even recognizing that when civilians were killed or whatever, none of us would accept the carpet bombing of the whole of the Northern Islands in order to take out the IRA. Just none of us would see that as reasonable. Even people who would, vehemently oppose the IRA. So it's an immoral argument, and I hope all of them get dragged to The Hague. I want to see all of them in prison.
I really hope so. I don't have much optimism about that. We need a change in the international system to begin with to bring these people to the proper courts, because the current international system apparently is built in a way that keeps these criminals immune from getting persecuted and being sent to serve some jail time for what they did to the people in our region, including hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians got murdered in the past 2-3 decades, including 500,000 children in Iraq, many thousands in different parts of we're talking about Syria, now in Palestine, strangling the people with sanctions. This has to come to an end. We're not really asking for much, and this is not like a hateful speech towards the United States. If any, the other day I challenged one American friend who said, like, you Middle Easterners hate us in America. I was like, why would we hate you? Are we really jealous of what you have in the United States? We just want you to stop meddling in our affairs. If you come to our country in Syria, I can assure you 100%, you hold an American flag and write on your chest, I'm an American, and people will come, like, ask you if you need help, you need food, you need the direction. It's like they don't speak much of an English, but they try, because this is how we're used in the region to treat our guests. We don't want to harm you, but when you're coming and stealing the oil in Syria, looting our resources, killing our people, of course there would be some let's say negative sentiments toward the American government, and we don't wish ill upon the American people. But I truly wish that the politicians, these criminal psychopaths, would be held accountable, and that's why I try to share stories and communicate with people like yourself. I want to share your story with the people. I want to wake up many more people, and it's happening in front of our eyes. You can see how on social media every American politician or congressman posts, America stands with Israel. Just go to the comments, like thousands of comments under this. No, we don't stand with Israel. You're just paid by AIPAC, and they just post this, how much donations this person received. Like, it became an open game. It's like they cannot hide any longer their let's say their complicity and how much money they receive from this lobby. So I'm happy that there is a great awakening in this case. I'm happier to have you on my channel, although we spoke about sad, unfortunate events in Palestine, but it's important even to shed light on these unfortunate events. I try to not show people graphic footage, but I encourage them to go to X. This is the only place sometimes we're able to see this footage, because I know it hurts your feelings and it hurts you from inside, but it's important. It's like a fuel, because anger is also fuel. And I don't always wake up in the morning saying, oh, what a happy life, I'm going to work. No, it's most of the time it's the anger and the frustration of watching this type of footage that motivates me to create more content on this channel to educate more people. So I'm very thankful, Natalie, for what you do. And for human rights and for the Palestinians, it's very important to have voices like yourself and also sharing your voices with us.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege. And what I would say to people, it is, like you said, it is important we bear witness. It's incredibly painful to bear witness. And at times you might need to take a moment just to breathe. I try and encourage that with people that in our group back home. But it is important we bear witness, because that's about us saying to the Palestinians, your life matters. And what I would remind people is we have to recognize the power that we have at this moment. It's about building the critical mass. So every action, every person we speak to and we persuade takes us a step closer to building that critical mass. And we will reach it. We just need to try and reach it much quicker.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much.
I'm hopeful
Inshallah.
about that. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to today's live streaming. I also appreciate you for tuning in and watching this live streaming and this conversation. Tomorrow, we're going to have another live streaming at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Diane Saar, she is an independent candidate for U.S. Senate 2024. She's coming to this channel and she's going to explain the differences between her and other candidates and how we can support her to get into the Senate, especially that she's not funded by AIPAC like many others in the United States. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and we will see you tomorrow. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.